Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk here at RSA 2025. Terry Sweeney with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Charlotte Wylie, Senior Vice President and Deputy CSO with Okta. Charlotte, thanks for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk.
Thank you for having me.
We are talking about managing identity in the era of AI. What could go wrong? This is obviously a really potent topic. I mean, we have both like the centrality of identification management, which is such a fertile ground for attacks and those sorts of things, coupled with AI, the technology that is really changing the face of our entire industry. As AI agents get more common, let's start with, if you could just walk us through some of the risks that they pose for identity security, and also like what are some of the unintentional risks that they create?
Yeah, of course. Definitely the risk landscape around non-human identities, AI agents, Gen AI, is definitely creating this sort of acceleration of trust erosion around the digital identity itself. And so what we need to think about collectively as an industry is how are we approaching securing those non-human identities, those agentic identities, in a way that is correlated to the way that we deal with human identities as well. Essentially, we're dealing with the same identity threats, but in a very different way. Things are moving faster. Attackers are, they're leveraging cheaper technology, and they're more sophisticated. We have to respond quicker as a result. So I think that whilst it is a challenge ahead of us in the way that we keep ahead of this and secure from day one around the identities of these agents, we shouldn't really be overcomplicating how we do so. We should be thinking about the same identity threats as we do with human identities.
That was really well stated. I'm wondering if you can take a deeper cut and just help me understand where human and non-human sort of identity really differs.
Sure. I think that things that I would really hope that people are thinking about is, like, how are you rotating credentials for these accounts? Okay. How are you making sure that end-to-end you've got visibility of these accounts, you're remediating these accounts where there is a requirement, and you're vaulting those non-human identities appropriately, and hopefully with a unified solution like Okta, and in a way that is correlated to the same mechanisms and points of protection you have around identities as human identities as well, your employees and your contractors, etc.
I assume the malicious non-human identities are really good at making them look like they're actually good guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when you think about all of the different solutions that you may have in terms of securing all your identity and access management, all the controls that you have in place, you need to be thinking about where do the gaps exist where an attacker could get in and really walk through the door when it comes to securing those non-human identities. So you need, like I say, you just need to take a big step back and think about things from how am I dealing with this for the human accounts that I have, and I really shouldn't be thinking too differently for those agents.
And there's no need to separate these two kinds of identities.
Well, I think that we need to be able to respond faster and quicker, and just be prepared, I think, for like more sophisticated social engineering attacks, things like very impressive phishing campaigns, or where you're seeing these accounts that are deep fakes that are bypassing like current verification, things like that. So you've got to think about how these agents are being used from an attack perspective, and then internally how you're securing your own adoption of agentic AI.
So with all that in mind, how is it that organizations should be thinking about protecting themselves against these generative AI threats, including systems and processes and policies that need to be in place?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenge that we're all going to have to stir into. And so really it's looking at sort of the threat profile of your organization. Where are those gaps in your controls today? What are the point solutions that you have? Do you have a unified identity provider? What are the gaps that are, pre, during, and post authentication that exist that you're going to have to really challenge and resolve when it comes to agentic AI and non-human identities? That's the key thing.
Okay. Does relying on a single vendor for identity security come with its own risks? What threats are posed if the vendor themselves gets breached?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I actually think that there is merit to having a unified solution. So what I was mentioning before around having multiple point solutions in your identity and access management controls can lead to disruption and fragmentation in the way you have things configured or set up. And there, this very sort of muddied vendor soup in a way that you have from a control standpoint. When it comes to unifying around one vendor, you reduce that risk because you are getting something that is a federated solution. You're really looking at the end-to-end solution and having a single pane of glass. And I really think that when it comes to Okta, for example, that's very much what we focus on. We want to be that one unified solution for our customers, where we're giving that one single view end-to-end for identity and access management.
Well, you've answered some of this, but I'm wondering if you can take a deeper cut at what customer organizations should look for when they're choosing an identity security provider.
Yeah, I think that really do they have their identity and access management strategy in place? Do they understand what their North Star is? Then they can start to really consider what the controls are that they want to put in place to get them there. After that, they can then really think about what are those either point solutions or platforms that they want to be leveraging that are going to get them to their strategic goals. It should never be a vendor conversation first. It should always start with the strategy. It should always start with what are you solving for? What are your control weaknesses? What are you trying to achieve in terms of maturity for the security program? What are the threats that are unique to identity and access management for your given industry or organization? Then start to think about how can we unify that around a very comprehensive identity and access management solution like Okta.
Excellent. How does Okta help businesses maintain security in this era of AI gone a little wild? One presumes that Okta is using AI for good to fight the bad, but help us understand that a little better.
Yeah, we are definitely fighting the good. That's definitely part of, absolutely, it's ingrained in our DNA. And we've been thinking about this for a long time, and we've really, I think, early adopters of how we want to make sure that our customers are securing agentic AI and Gen AI. So that's where we've brought on Auth for Gen AI. That's one of our product offerings, where we're really providing a product set that enables the developer to ensure that secure identity and access management controls are baked into and not bolted on agents and Gen AI in their development practices. So we're really thinking about how do we solve for this right now, and how do we keep solving for this in the future as the landscape of NHI increases and proliferates. We're very aware of the recent stat from Gartner, which they've suggested in 2028 that we will see 25% of breaches involving a compromised AI agent, which is a real watershed moment, I think, for the industry to think about how are they doing what they need to do right now in terms of baking in security in the way that they're leveraging these non-human identities and not bolting it on after the fact. What is their strategic direction that they're heading in, and how are they fixing it now?
You mentioned strategy a few minutes ago as something that companies should consider as they move toward an identity security provider. You also mentioned knowing the problem that you're solving for, problems that you're solving for, really. What other questions should organizations be asking themselves as they really look ahead to their identity security providers?
Yeah, I think that they should be really focusing on what are the threats specific to this evolution, this agentic AI evolution, and my specific industry.
Okay.
And at that point in time, you can then draw a conclusion of what are the controls that I need to have in place, and how do I make sure that those controls are effective, maintained, and provided by vendors and trusted partners that we can work with as this evolves in the coming years.
Some really great insights here and some excellent guidance, Charlotte. Thank you so much for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk.
Thank you for having me. We've
been talking with Charlotte Wylie from Okta. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll catch you next time.